Hi, I'm Deborah, naturopath here at Nourishe-Health-and-Wellness in Proton, and I'm kind of excited and nervous to be bringing this to you tonight. So thanks very much for joining me for this first webinar in my series of 4, and I've called these Know Your Body Better. And the idea is that at the end of this, at the end of each webinar, in fact, at the end of the series, you'll understand a little more about taking care of yourself and perhaps when you need intervention and what you need to do about it. I'll be sharing a little bit of technical stuff along with some practical advice on looking after your health. And yeah, any questions that you've got, feel free to just ask away. So if you're watching this as the live premiere, you should be able to type them into the little chat box that's up and I should be able to see them. If for some reason I can't, I will come back and basically let you know, and I will endeavour to answer them by email, or you can contact me on Facebook, and all my contact details are on each slide and along at the end of the presentation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to switch into a slightly different screen, and the slide will come up, and I'm going to talk away in the background while my slides run through. So this is part of my Foundations of Health. I always talk to my clients about this, and I've called this series Foundations of Health from Top to Bottom. So let's get on with it. This is the first time I've ever done it, and my goal really is to help you understand your symptoms better. I want you to have some tools to take away that you can put into your virtual basket that may help you improve your health and to support you on your health journey. So if you come to me as a client, I will work with you and put you on a plan, and we'll get you started and get you sorted. It's up to you really to maintain that. So tonight we're starting with the gut, the digestive system, and what you need to know to look after it. So these symptoms, do you recognise any? I'm hoping by the end of this webinar you'll have a much better understanding about the connection between your own symptoms and the microbiome that inhabits your GIT, your gastrointestinal tract. Pretty sure most of us have experienced at least one of these once in our life. A little bit of history and biology to give you a bit of background about this incredibly fascinating topic. Microbiome research has been around since the 17th century. Your microbiome is uniquely yours. It's an ecosystem of thousands of different species of microorganisms, including bacteria, fungi, and viruses. The term microbiome is derived from micro meaning small and biome meaning biological community. So think of your microbes as a small biological community, and you'll kind of understand the impact that even small changes in our diet, nutrition, and general well-being can have. Since the 17th century, microscopes have evolved, so we now have a much better understanding of the level of microbes that inhabit our body. The gut is the central location of the microbiome, but we also know that microbes live on nearly every internal and external surface of your body. Alrighty, there are roughly 40 trillion bacterial cells in your body and only 30 trillion human cells. So we are more bacteria than we are human. I actually find that quite fascinating and also quite gross at the same time. With up to 1,000 species of bacteria in the human gut microbiome, each plays a different role in your body, and tonight we're going to look at what this means. I'm focusing on 4, so the 4 key areas that I'll be talking through tonight are mood support, immune protection, key vitamin production, and weight management. All very, very important in our general health and well-being, and all very much driven by how healthy our gut actually is. Okay, so the mood support. Now this is a thing called the gut-brain axis. So if you think of the top to bottom concept, the top being the brain, the bottom being the gut, and it's called the GBA. Why it's called that I don't know, because actually the food goes in at the top and comes out at the bottom. But anyway, the 2 organs communicate through a thing called the vagus nerve, and some of you will be familiar with that term. Think hiccups is a vagal nerve disruptor. We also communicate on this channel through the endocrine system, which is our, hormones, gut hormones and neurotransmitters. So we often talk about the gut being the second brain. It kind of drives a lot of stuff that happens throughout the body. Key neurotransmitters, so these are the little signals that come through that tell the nervous system what hormones and what nutrients it needs to release, what it needs to be doing. Serotonin, dopamine and GABA are the three main ones that we think of when we think of the gut. Mood management, healthy sleep and anxiety regulation, and they're all made by your own gut microbes. So in my June webinar, I'll be talking a little bit more about the anxiety and mood stuff. So bear in mind that what you eat is definitely going to have an impact on that. The next key area of health is immune protection, and I could actually do a whole webinar on this. I may well look at doing one of these next year. It's a real passion of mine, looking after the immune system, because that's kind of what drove me to become a naturopath. So 80% of our immune system lives in what we call gut-associated lymphoid tissue, which is GALT, G-A-L-T. T cells are part of the lymphatic system, the lymphocytes rather, and think of them as the kind of generals that run the army. They control your immune response to both self and foreign bodies. So think of them as antigens and self-presented antigens. Anything that poses a threat to our regulatory system is going to stimulate an immune response. And this is what we call cell-mediated immunity. They also help to prevent autoimmune diseases. They all live in the gut and they get trained by the microbes that live in the gut. So this is the lymphocytes. And if you've been in my clinic or you come in for a booking, we can actually look at these under the microscope doing a live blood screening, and they're absolutely fascinating. I love them. They have a process called antigen presentation, and this is where they generate a specific response to a specific pathogen. So something that's invaded our system, they look at it, they decide whether they know what it is. If they don't, they kind of present it to the panel, and the panel then decides how they're going to respond. And it kind of always prompts that vision of Oliver and, presenting his empty plate and saying, please, sir, can I have some more? It's like, here you go. What am I supposed to do now? They also, microbes in the gut also protect us from the harmful bacteria and viruses and stop them passing through the intestinal barrier. So we want to contain them in the intestines, in the large intestine, and we want to make sure that they get disposed of. Vitamin production. So vitamin production is a big one. Vitamin K and vitamin B12 are the two key vitamins synthesized in our gut. Both of these vitamins are needed as we age. They're needed throughout life, but they become quite crucial the older we get. And let's face it, we're all aging. So your body makes these in your gut from the food you eat. Vitamin K, known for its blood clotting and bone mineralization function. So what that means, it helps to stimulate and it gets involved in the bone resorption. The way that we use bone is we use it up and then we kind of refurbish it and put it back out there again. So there's 3 different vitamin K vitamins. K1, which is found in plants. So the vitamin K1 deficiency is most associated with bone loss and fractures. So that's the one that you'll find generally in your supplements. Vitamin K2 is synthesized by our gut bacteria. So what that means is they take it from the food we eat. And so if we're eating foods that we know are going to be rich in vitamin K, that's where that comes from. And is more associated with vascular health. So that's your circulatory, your veins and things like that. Vitamin K3 converted to vitamin K2 by the gut bacteria. So vitamin K1 and K2 are the key vitamins that we're looking for in that area. The other one is vitamin B12. So we know B12, it's part of that B vitamin family, part of our energy giving, part of our managing stress response. But the other thing that, the main thing that we use vitamin B12 for is to metabolize fats, proteins and carbs. So as we get older, we lack a thing called intrinsic factor, which enables us to extract that B12 from food. So quite often people will get a vitamin B12 injection just to support their ability to metabolize food correctly. Weight management. Now this again is probably another webinar on its own. Microbes are super smart and they can determine how many calories are absorbed from the food we eat. So there are these little things called obesogenic bacteria, and we use that term to describe the bacteria that pull more calories out of the food you eat. So they want as much calorific sustenance as they can get. There are also certain types of gut bacteria that can produce chemicals that can help make you feel full. So we kind of want those more than we want the obesogenic bacteria. There's these other little things in there called firmicutes or firmicutes that make up the largest portion of a human gut microbiome. So they feed on sugar, they make you crave sugar, and they create insulin resistance to keep sugar available for themselves. We need them because they do extract sugar, but again, when they're overgrown, they take too much. They can affect moods by taking tryptophan away from serotonin. So tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin. Serotonin we know is already involved in mood management. They take it down another pathway, and you get nerve irritants and Krebs cycle modifiers, which is your energy recycling plant. So ultimately you get cravings, fatigue, obesity, depression, you name it, the things associated with being generally unhappy with ourselves. Okay. One of the most stable microflora is a thing called bacterioids, and they're highly abundant. We need these as well. Reduced levels of these guys can be associated with obesity, and increased is associated with IBS and diabetes. So it's all about balance, which we're going to come to in just a moment. So looking at dysbiosis. Now this is one of the fascinating things about the gut. We want our gut to be healthy. We want it to be balanced. Alongside microbial diversity, having trouble getting the words out here, comes the balance of good and bad bacteria, which plays a significant role in our health. So when we look at the microbiome, and like I've said, everybody's makeup is unique, we want to make sure that we are balanced. Now, we're not going to be 100% good or 100% bad. We want to have a nice, happy family kind of trucking along and they're doing its job. Dysbiosis is the term we use to describe an unbalanced microbiome. So when more bad microbes exist in your gut versus the good ones. So the bad guys include things like Streptococcus, think strep throat, so we're very familiar with that. E. coli, so E. coli lives in our gut. We need E. coli, we need it there to help maintain the microbial balance. But when it gets overgrown, we get things like stomach ulcers, and it's a predominant cause of a lot of stomach upsets. And you know that it can be picked up around the place. So it is one of those ones that we don't really want to get an overgrowth of. Staphylococcus, staph infection, so they're, pretty contagious. And Candida, which is a big one. So systemic Candida is really common and can present as fatigue, recurring infections, or even just bloating and gas. So one of the ways to check whether or not you've got Candida or you think you might have a little bit of a Candida overgrowth is to stand in front of a mirror, poke your tongue out. If you've got a white coating on there or a whitey yellow coating, that's an indication that there's something going on with your gut. Grab your toothbrush, give it a big brush, see if it brushes off. If it brushes off, it could be just something to do with food hygiene. If it doesn't, the chances are your gut is pretty unbalanced. The good microbes, on the other hand, include things like our lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. So what I'm going to be doing in the next week or so, or over the coming weeks, is talking a bit more about these in my Facebook group, which is the Nourish Nutritional Network. So feel free to join that up. And the other thing that we really need to be aware of with dysbiosis is that it's increasingly recognised as a driver of chronic disease. So things like fibromyalgia, we've mentioned fatigue, depression, anxiety, autism, brain fog, IBS, colorectal cancer, you name it. Just gut dysbiosis is a very much an underlying driver. And so if you are diagnosed with something or something happens, I think the key thing really is to just clean up your eating and get your gut sorted before you do anything. And the theory behind it is that the balance of gut bacteria affects the immune system and the health of the lining of the gut. So think of leaky gut, where we know that the little junctions that are holding that kind of membrane together are a little bit loose, and it's not that big bulky particles float through, but stuff gets through that shouldn't really get there. So we're back at this little symptom picture. We know that dysbiosis has been identified as playing a possible role with a variety of health problems. Think back to this picture, and if you related to any of them, what else could you add here? We need to make sure that we balance that microbial diversity. So, you know, if it's unbalanced, are you getting migraines, sore joints maybe, and any of those things? You can never have 100% good bacteria in your gut. It just doesn't exist naturally. There's always balance. So this is what we call homeostasis, and homeostasis is something that your body is always striving to maintain. It's about balance. And having some stressors within the body is a good thing because it stimulates the immune system, and it also leads back to that development of beneficial bacteria and other positive outcomes that we have in our body. All right, disruptors. This is one of the key things that I really want to go through. So we'll start straight off with poor diet. It's a no-brainer. Hopefully none of you watching this have a diet like this, but I'm sure at some time your diet looked very close to it. You know, think teenage years. For me personally, I remember when McDonald's came to New Zealand, that was pretty exciting. So of course we all ate it. And you know, I do bang on a lot about diet. Highly processed foods can alter the balance of microbes in your gut. So think refined vegetable oils, carbohydrates, so not all carbohydrates, but refined carbs. So when people say to me they're going on a no-carb diet, I kind of get a bit stressed because we get energy from carbs. That's where our sugars come from. It's where we break down those molecules to get our building blocks of energy. So it's really, really important that you do get carbs in your diet, but it's looking at where they're coming from. Trans fats, hydrogenated fats, deep fried food, you know, highly fat processed food or extracts in food, processed grain products like that white burger bun there, coatings on fish, some of the fish crumbs and things like that, and foods containing added sugars. So anything that's added like cereals and snacks, breads and condiments, a lot of sauces like tomato sauce is sweetened up the wazoo. It's just revolting. Additives and preservatives is the other thing that I have a really big thing about. So I always recommend to people to download, if you can, onto your phone an app called the Chemical Maze, and it's called the Chemical Maze Shopping Companion. I've got a little old book that I use, and I've also got the app on the phone, and you can look up items and it'll give you a number or a name or a description. It'll tell you when it's used, how it's used, what the benefits are, if it's good, bad or indifferent, and possible side effects and things like that. So it's actually really useful. Medication is another one that disrupts and causes dysbiosis. So antibiotics, really commonly prescribed, but the main problem with these is that they eliminate all the good bacteria in your gut alongside the bad guys. So we want them to get rid of the bad guys, but they're non-discriminatory. So they can lower immune function and raise the risk for infections, allergies and diseases, which is kind of ironic given that they're fighting an infection. But anyway, it can also take up to 2 years for your microbiome to recover from antibiotic use. So if you're on course after course of antibiotics, it's going to take all that extra time to fully recover and get that microbiome thriving again. We also know that bacteria have become resistant to antibiotics, so it makes serious infections harder to fight. Now, I don't think that overprescribing of antibiotics is an ongoing thing, but just be aware that you need to question the need for them when you are looking at taking them. The other one that we've got on here, and I've thought would be really good to include, because this has come up in conversation quite a lot lately, is the proton pump inhibitors, or your reflux medication. So these reduce the production of acid in the stomach, and it's unfortunate that stomach acid is actually needed to kill harmful bacteria such as the E. coli. We reduce the stomach acid, the E. coli get an overgrowth, the E. coli cause the ulcer, we get prescribed medication, and it becomes a vicious circle. So constant and prolonged use of this medication does increase your chances of developing dysbiosis. They're not the only medications. Other things such as NSAIDs, paracetamol and painkillers are kind of the key things. There's lots of other medications, like some of the autoimmune medications that can cause issues as well. So not exclusive just to those categories. Excess hygiene. So this is all about the hygiene hypothesis, the lack of exposure to certain microorganisms, meaning that we aren't stimulating our immune system and we're reducing immune tolerance. And there's a lot of discussion around the traps about this. And I firmly believe that we are over-hygienating, if that's a word, everything that we do. The other thing to be aware of with hygiene products is things like dishwashing liquids that might contain an ingredient called triclosan. It's an antibacterial and antifungal compound that kills germs. But research has found that even after washing, traces of this is still left on the dishes, and those dishes are the things that we're putting our food on to eat our next meal. We also know that the chemical, this particular chemical has changed the population of bacteria in the gut. Once this chemical was removed, it was reversed. So there's a significant impact that some of these chemicals play on the dysbiosis factor. The other scary thing about triclosan in particular is that exposure to it can be even more detrimental to the health of a developing fetus and newborn than it is to adults. So, you know, let's just think about the next generation before we start getting carried away with cleansing the crap out of everything. All right, are you feeling stressed? I hope not. Stress is a key thing. It's a key driver of many, many, many things. So what we're looking at tonight is how this affects the microbiome. And when I do my next one, which is on the stress anxiety thing, we'll talk a little bit more about what you can then do to moderate that. So the bottom line is, without stress on the body, we'd be dead. Too much stress can kill us. So we're going to be dead either way. It's important to recognise that the unhealthy types of stress, where we end up feeling unwell and becoming very sick or diseased, are different to the stressors that our body goes through on a daily basis, just maintaining that homeostasis. Stress can reduce immune function, so that allows those bad guys to proliferate, and it will outnumber the good guys. It alters your gut motility, which is the ability of your intestines to move food through. Gut motility, this is key. If you are constipated, you're not moving anything through. Stress can cause one of two things. It can cause diarrhea or it can cause constipation. Either way, motility is all about the peristaltic motion that the bowel goes through when it moves things through. So the idea is that the bowel just gently pushes stuff through, takes its nutrients as it's needed. If you think of diarrhea, well, it just is going to all flood through. It's not going to get anything out of it at all. And constipation, it just stagnates there and starts to ferment. So this alteration in how food material moves through your digestive system influences which microbes proliferate or reduce. So we want to make sure that we're balanced. We want to make sure we've got good guys. We want to make sure that the good guys are balanced. So this is how we get that dysbiosis from stress. Stress also changes your brain chemistry, which makes you crave refined carbs. So think, if you're not moving food through, your body's going to be sluggish. You need energy. We get energy from a quick fix, a chocolate bar, something like that, something carby, a McDonald's, deep fried fish from the fish shop, and they all feed those bad bacteria. Alrighty, looking after your microbiome, let's get on to the eat your veggies bit. So this is pretty straightforward. It's a great image, very colourful. Look at all those colours on there. Eat your colours every day. Plant-based foods contain the fibre and phytochemicals, which we call polyphenols, to help good bacteria flourish and to reduce overgrowths of bad bacteria. Plants also provide us with pre- and probiotics. Okay, so prebiotics are the non-digestible part of foods, the fibrous bits in bananas, onions, garlic, Jerusalem artichoke, skins of apples, chicory root beans, and anything you can think of that's got a fibrous component to it. So where you have something like a Crohn's disease, you can't eat fibre. So that becomes a real problem. It's why people with Crohn's struggle so much with their digestive and their intestinal integrity. Prebiotics and probiotics, one of my favourite things. So when I first became a naturopath, this was kind of something that I got really, really passionate about, and I went to lots and lots of different conferences and webinars where I learned all about probiotics. And again, it's something that's a bigger subject than what I've got time for this evening. Prebiotic fibre goes through the small intestine undigested, and it's fermented when it reaches the large intestine. So this fermentation process feeds the beneficial bacteria colony, so including the probiotic bacteria, and helps to increase the number of desirable bacteria in our gut. So when we talk about fibre and prebiotics, they are creating that fermentation by which the probiotics are kind of released or manufactured in the gut. The probiotics are the live beneficial bacteria, so they're naturally created by the process of fermentation, and they're found in foods like yogurt, sauerkraut, miso, kimchi, and anything that's fermented. Probiotics are also cultured in labs and made into supplements. So they're either single strain probiotics or multiple strains. So for example, if you go into a store and want to get something for diarrhea, you're probably going to be recommended something like a Saccharomyces boulardii, and that's really good for that. It's also a good one for managing Candida. Fermented foods. So we know that these are now, they're prebiotic and probiotic. They have a dual action. They're not for everybody. So for what it's worth, I don't do well on fermented foods. So a lot of my clients are sort of caught up with having this in their diet. And yes, I absolutely agree that it's worth trying. If your symptoms either don't improve or get worse, get rid of it, give it to your neighbour and try something else. I've talked a little bit about the lacto-fermentation that happens, and so for me personally, I think that's why I'm no good on those fermented foods. If you pre-registered for this, you would have been sent the Beneficial Bacteria Guide. Have a look at that because it's actually got foods in there for this exact thing, the prebiotic, probiotic, a little bit about them, what they do and how to eat them. So the fermented foods have been through a process called lacto-fermentation, in which the natural bacteria feed on the sugar and starch in the food, creating lactic acid. So if you're lactose intolerant, the chances are lactic acid intolerant as well. Did that come out right? I hope so. So anything that's got a lactic acid in it, or a fermentation that is driven by or causes lactic acid to be made, isn't going to sit well with my tummy, so I don't eat them. Things like sourdough bread, can't eat it. Sauerkraut, doesn't do well for me. There's a few odd things like a little bit of kimchi I can have, and the occasional kind of fermented vegetables, but yeah, really not that good. And I suspect it's probably just my microflora. And I've tried all sorts of different things. I'm not too worried, actually. The other thing with the fermentation process, though, is it preserves the food and it creates beneficial enzymes. So this is where I really like them, because they have the enzymes in them, B vitamins, omega-3 fatty acids, and various strains of probiotics. So there is a lot of beneficial evidence in there. Just be aware that it's not necessarily going to be everything that is going to work for you. Relaxing and breathing. Well, we know that reducing stress through daily practices such as regular exercise and meditation both improves our psychological and physical well-being. There's a great book that I recommend called The Relaxation Response by Herbert Benson. It's a tiny little red book. It's pretty old. It's very short and easy to read, and it was a study done on people that did transcendental meditation. So if nothing else, let your microbiome be your daily motivator to practice mindfulness and meditation. Calm the system down. Start the day unstressed. Exercise. We know that moving is going to affect our moods, and that's not a new concept. We know that exercise releases endorphins, and endorphins make us feel happy because everyone's seen Totally Blonde. Many of us would probably say that we feel less cranky when we go to do some exercise, or more relaxed after a walk or a visit to the gym. I know for me, certain exercises, so running I find really beneficial. High intensity stuff does actually, if I'm in a real slump, it does get me going. And also the other thing too is think of in the old days when they eat their dinner and then have a constitutional. So, the constitutional is all about getting things moving, and it's not just the body. So if you start exercising, you improve your gut motility. We talked about that just before. Think moving through, getting everything moving through, and your microbiome balance. So where to from here? Putting the good bacteria back where they belong. So probiotics. I'm going to do a little bit of a tech thing, and then we'll come on to sort of what to look for. So because probiotics have an ability to influence gut flora composition, restore the gastrointestinal tight junction integrity, and influence immune regulation, probiotics are a key therapeutic strategy that we use to influence inflammation both in the digestive system, the GI tract, and systemic. So let me just kind of break that down for you. What they do is you take the probiotic, and it's got all its different strains. They come in and they start doing their job. They multiply, they get in there, they eat up the bad guys, they do what they need to do. When I first started my training, there was the theory that they colonize. We now know that they don't. What they do is they create colonies. So the probiotics that you take in aren't necessarily going to live in there, but what we want to do is we want to proliferate them through the gut so that when you eat food, your body is able to take those nutrients out. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. We regenerate them as we eat. Because we know they can influence that immune response. Think feeding the gut. Think about those lymphocytes that we talked about earlier. I think that's a really important thing. If you're slightly unwell and you don't really quite know what it is, you could try supplementing with a probiotic or getting some probiotic food. Turn to your fermented foods if that's what works for you, and they then become a part of a key strategy. So the thing to remember with probiotics is that we know that there's thousands of different strains of these. There's so many on the market. It's really important to know which strain is going to be right for you. And the idea behind the inflammation is the body's natural response to a threat. So we want inflammation. We just don't want it to run out of control. And it is a response that tends to just run away unhinged unless there's something to curb it. And the localized inflammation is what we talk about in the digestive system. So that's when you might get a bit of burning, a bit of indigestion, you might feel a bit crampy, you haven't had a bowel movement, so that's starting to get a bit inflamed because there's only a certain amount of space in there. And then after a while, if that's not corrected, it will spread throughout your system. And once you get systemic inflammation, that's where you start to see some of these chronic diseases coming in. This slide, buyer beware. Don't be freaked out by this. It's just about buying the best. So things to look out for are is to understand, is it evidence-based? So does it contain evidence-based probiotic strains? Has the probiotic been evaluated for efficacy? Is it actually based on good science? So is it going to do the job that it's telling you it's going to do? Different strains of probiotics do different things. Does this one that you're buying contain the right strains to meet your specific needs? And this is where it starts to go a little bit pear-shaped. So it's really complex. Generally, when you go into a retail store, you'll find that they have a selection of different probiotics. I don't get too hung up on the quantity in there because most of them are actually quite reasonable. And you're kind of trusting that the company manufacturing it has actually done their research and put that together. I would be asking if the store has some backup material for that, because probiotics are not cheap. And some of the more expensive ones that I do work with, some that are quite expensive, they're highly refined. They're quite specific in their action, and we need to be really careful when we prescribe them. So we're looking at the dose that is being given, and we're talking millions, billions, and trillions. So it really depends on the strain. And this is something that I'm going to go through in the Nutritional Network on Facebook, because I think it's a really important thing for you guys to look out for. So gut diversity. In healthy people, there's a diverse microbiome. So it's made up of many, many different things. It's what we want. That's your unique fingerprint. In an unhealthy individual, your fingerprint's a bit blurry. In fact, it might even have been kind of stripped off like a bit of super glue on the end of the finger. Less diversity, which means an increase of the bacteria that we associate with disease. So what does this mean? Well, look at that. Do you need a microbiome coach? Is that going to be me? So this is my little sales pitch. As a naturopath, I want to encourage everybody, and myself included, to stay on our little wagon and eat well and look after our bodies all the time. Life deals with things at us, throws things at us. In fact, it throws us at things, and we can't always do what we want. So the way that I approach health, it's changed a little bit since I first started. I'm much more looking now at the health story. There's a number of questionnaires that I get you to do when you come in as a client. There's also testing that we can do. Now, I don't do a lot of testing. The testing that I look at is reasonably pricey, but in some cases I think it's really worth it. Where we've got an issue that's not being corrected, where we've got an ongoing issue that just kind of seems to come right and then goes bad again, I think testing provides us with just that little extra. It's the key in the lock that opens that next door, and we might be able to uncover and reveal and change the plan and alter things and actually get you back on the right track again. So there's two tests that I recommend for GI health. First one is a Sibo test. So Sibo is a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So this is the upper intestine. And then the second one is a GI mapping. So this is a stool test that's done, and there's varying levels of what we can test for depending on what it is that we want to get out of it. Both of them are going to give, the GI mapping, all of those are going to give us a good breakdown of the microbiome. It's going to give you a list of the good microbes, bad microbes, any overgrowths and things like that. I don't do them first off unless it's something that you specifically want to do. If you come and say, look, I absolutely want to get a GI test done, then I can arrange that for you. The main thing that I do is help assess your current diet and nutrition. So we look at what you're eating and what you're not eating. Not so many people these days are eating a really crappy diet, but there's a lot of foods that we perceive as being healthy that are not helping our gut. And I can help you assess the changes that you can and need to make. So when I say can make, for a lot of people, changing anything is really stressful, and we don't want to create more stress. So we look at what you can do and then go from there. There's no magic pill, unfortunately. I wish there was. I'd be a millionaire. And so what do you expect? So what can you expect from making these changes? When you start to make gradual changes to your diet and lifestyle, you're building a strong community of microbes in your gut. So that really is the starting point. This growth of microbes and microbiota, gut flora, whatever you want to call it, is going to benefit your body and your overall well-being by reducing inflammation and ultimately improving your health. And isn't that what we want? We want less inflammation and better health. So if you're keen to work with me, if you've resonated with anything in this webinar, feel free to jump online. Here's my contact details. Deborah@nourishe.co.nz is my website, is my email, website at the bottom, nourishe.co.nz. You can book online, and there's a few different options. If you're unsure, just make a booking and make a comment in there, and once it comes through, I can have a look. And also, if you think this webinar is going to be beneficial to anybody that you know, please feel free to share. It's free. It's free until I do the next one. All you have to do is share the link. And for anyone that hasn't pre-registered for this, tonight's premiere of it is not going to get the notes. But I think it's still worth listening to and having making your own notes on. What's up next? I just thought I'd do a quick rundown on what I'm planning. The next one is going to be stress, anxiety, insomnia. So this is building on the foundations of what we've done and looking at how the gut really affects mental wellness. So this is a big one. It's a big topic, and I'm going to try and keep it to around about the same length as tonight's webinar. Webinar number 3, acid or alkaline. So this is all about the pH balance and how this affects our health. So again, looking at what we eat and what sorts of things are going to affect that balance, how you can test for it very simply, done at home, and how that might be something that really resonates with you and might be what you need to do to get your health better. And the last one, which I'll be doing around about November, will be on energy. So looking at the mitochondria, looking at the really basic elements of where our energy comes from and where our energy reserves are. So the hot topic really is the stress, anxiety, insomnia. That comes up quite a lot, and I suspect that will be an ongoing annual thing that comes up in the webinar series. Now the next 3 I'm going to be looking at, they'll be subscription based. So they'll be about $75 for all 3 or $35 per webinar. And if you pre-register, you'll get the accompanying slides sent to you with supplemental information, so a little bit more detailed than what you got for this one. And then after each one, you'll get some other useful handouts that relate to what I will have talked about in that webinar. The other thing I'm planning with these ones is to do these all live. So there'll be interaction on the night. So think about that if that's something that inspires you, or you think you know someone that's going to do better from a live webinar. I'm over the fear of doing it, so the next time I'm going to have a go at doing a live one. More details to follow. So if you want to keep up with what I'm doing, you can jump onto my website and sign up for my monthly email newsletter that I send out, or just flick me an email and I'll add you to the list. And the other thing I'm always looking for is topics. So if there's topics or something that's come up in your life and you think, gosh, I wonder what I need to do about that, or is there something I can use to do this with, or I don't know, anything that you had a question of. When you go into a health store, what do you ask them? Is that a topic? Feel free to let me know, and I can look at trying to create something for that. So I just want to say thank you for attending, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and also to Biopractica Australia, from whom I acquired the foundations for this presentation. And it certainly enabled me to start the process. It's been quite a learning curve getting here. If you want the references for some of the information that's in this webinar, I'm happy to provide them. You just need to email me and let me know. I really hope this has given you some insight into your GIT, your gastrointestinal tract, and more importantly, given you a few things to think about when you're looking after your health. Even if I've just created more questions, I know that you're going to go out there and start questioning things a little bit more. So I just want to say thanks again for joining me. Any further questions can be asked via email or through Facebook. And on that note, I'm going to pop myself back on the camera. Here we go. So I'll look forward to either hearing from you soon or seeing you later in the year when I release the June webinar. So take care out there, and thanks very much for tuning in.